My cousin made a joke about my infertility at Thanksgiving. 6 months later, I announced I was adopting. On the exact day she revealed her divorce to the family. I've replayed that Thanksgiving in my head so many times, it's like a scene from a bad movie I can't stop watching. The smell of roasted turkey, the clinking of wine glasses, my aunt's forced laughter, and then my cousin Melissa leaning across the table with that smug grin and saying, "Well, at least you'll save money on kids' Christmas presents since, you know." The table went dead quiet for a second before my uncle snorted. My cheeks burned. I tried to swallow my mashed potatoes without choking, but it felt like everyone's eyes were on me, waiting for me to either laugh or cry. Melissa just kept smiling, like she'd said something clever instead of gutting me in front of the whole family. Infertility isn't just some quirky fact about me, it's a wound I've been carrying for years. Doctor visits, negative tests, the quiet sobbing in the shower so my husband wouldn't hear. And here she was, turning it into a punchline between bites of stuffing. I mumbled something about needing air, pushed my chair back, and walked straight out the front door into the cold night. That was the moment I knew I was done letting her, or anyone in my family, make me feel small. I didn't say anything that night. I didn't give her the satisfaction of watching me break. But the seed was planted. Melissa has always been the golden one. Pretty, charismatic, never had to work too hard for anything. She married her high school sweetheart Brian at 22, had their first kid at 24, and spent the next decade curating the perfect Facebook family album. Meanwhile, I was the one politely smiling through baby showers and family dinners while my insides twisted. She never missed a chance to accidentally remind me what I was missing. I used to wonder if she was just clueless. That night erased all doubt. She knew exactly where to aim. Over the next few months, life carried on, but that sting never faded. Then in early spring, my mom called with the kind of hushed excitement usually reserved for lottery wins or surprise proposals. "Melissa and Brian are separating," she whispered. I had to bite my tongue to keep my voice even. Apparently, Brian had been spending a lot of time with a coworker, and Melissa's perfect life was unraveling fast. I told my husband later that night, "I'm not celebrating, but I'm also not sending flowers." He just gave me that look that says, "You're already plotting something." He knows me too well. Then came the kicker. 6 months after that Thanksgiving, our annual summer family gathering was set. Everyone was going to be there. And that was when I realized this was my stage. I'd been quietly working through the adoption process with my husband for months, keeping it under wraps until we were sure. The paperwork was done, the agency matched us with a birth mother, and the final steps were in motion. All I had to do was pick the moment. Melissa had humiliated me at the table. She wanted an audience. Fine, I'd give her one. By the time the family BBQ rolled around in June, the air around Melissa was thick with unspoken gossip. She showed up late, sunglasses on even though it was overcast, dragging her 2 kids behind her like they were human shields. I caught the way my aunt rushed over to help her out of the car, the hushed murmurs as they disappeared into the kitchen. Melissa's smile was different now, tighter, more brittle. She still wore the designer sundress and perfectly styled hair, but it was like someone had cracked the porcelain underneath. And I'll admit, a small, dark part of me savored it. I hadn't told a soul about the adoption yet. Not my mom, not my siblings, no one. Keeping it locked inside was almost intoxicating, like I was holding a lit match in a room full of fireworks. We went through the usual motions. Hot dogs on the grill, kids running around with sparklers, my uncle getting tipsy and insisting on playing DJ from his phone. Melissa stayed on the fringes, nursing a glass of wine and making strained small talk. I noticed how no one asked about Brian. The divorce was the elephant in the yard, but no one dared to say his name. Halfway through the evening, my mom sidled up to me. "Did you hear about Melissa?" she whispered, as if it wasn't already the worst-kept secret in the family. I played dumb. She gave me the whole saga in a hushed rush. Brian was living in an apartment, Melissa was struggling, but keeping it together for the kids. That was when it clicked. The official divorce announcement was coming. Melissa wasn't going to let her business leak out in half-truths. She'd want to control the story, make herself the sympathetic lead in her own drama, which meant she was going to do it in person, with all eyes on her. And that's when my plan crystallized. I could have just told my mom and let the news trickle through the grapevine. But no, that's not how Melissa plays. She likes a stage. So I'd give her one, except she wouldn't be the only headliner. The rest of that BBQ, I kept my face neutral, my voice light, no hint of the storm brewing in my chest. I hugged Melissa goodbye like we were still on good terms. She even kissed my cheek, the faintest whiff of Chardonnay clinging to her. That night, I called the adoption agency to confirm the timing. We'd be cleared to make the official announcement in a matter of days. And wouldn't you know, it lined up perfectly with the weekend my mom had invited everyone over for a special family dinner. Melissa thought she'd be standing in the spotlight. She had no idea she'd be sharing it and losing it. The week before the dinner, the tension in the family chat was almost comical. My mom sent out the reminder, Saturday, 6 p.m., my house, dressed nice, big news, and immediately half a dozen cousins started speculating. My aunt, subtle as ever, replied, "Melissa, is this about what we talked about?" Melissa just sent back a coy smile emoji. I could practically hear her rehearsing her speech in the mirror. I'd seen her do it before, at her engagement party, her baby showers, every milestone where she could bask in the collective admiration. She'd tilt her chin just so, soften her voice on the vulnerable parts, maybe even tear up a little for effect. And I'll admit, I felt the old anxiety bubbling up. The same feeling I'd had at Thanksgiving. Small, exposed, like the air was thinner around me. Except this time, I wasn't empty-handed. I had something bigger than her cruelty. I had hope. I spent the next few days quietly preparing. I printed a few photos of the nursery we'd been putting together. Soft yellow walls, a white crib we'd assembled ourselves, a mobile with tiny fabric stars. I put them in a little album. Not flashy, just simple and warm. And I rehearsed too. Not a performance, but a promise. My husband was all in. "You sure you want to do this the same night?" he asked one morning while we were having coffee. "It's not too petty?" I laughed, a little sharper than I meant to. Petty would have been dragging her last Thanksgiving. This is about us. And if it happens to wipe that smug look off her face, bonus. By Friday, I started getting little clues that Melissa was already setting the stage. My cousin texted me, saying Melissa had asked her to help corral the kids during her announcement. Someone else mentioned Melissa was picking up cupcakes from a bakery she always uses for her special moments. I almost felt bad. Almost. The night before the dinner, I barely slept. I kept picturing that Thanksgiving. Her voice, the smirk, the way the room seemed to close in on me. And then I'd picture the nursery, the crib, the tiny shoes lined up on the shelf. One memory hurt like a bruise. The other felt like sunlight. Saturday came fast. I wore a soft blue dress, not flashy, but the kind of color that made my eyes pop. My husband carried the photo album in a small gift bag. We didn't say much on the drive over. The plan didn't need words anymore. When we pulled into my mom's driveway, I could see Melissa's car already there. She was standing in the kitchen when we walked in, hair curled, makeup perfect, wearing a dress that screamed, "main character." She greeted us with a tight smile, eyes flicking down to the bag in my husband's hand. She didn't know it yet, but that bag was the thing that was about to steal her scene. The dinner started out like every other forced family gathering. Too many people crammed into my mom's dining room, the smell of pot roast and perfume mixing into something vaguely suffocating. Melissa was glowing in that curated way she does, laughing just a bit too loudly at my uncle's bad jokes, touching her hair every few minutes, leaning into every conversation like she was the one they'd all come to see. I kept to the far end of the table, chatting with my younger cousins, letting her have her warm-up act. My husband sat beside me, a silent anchor, the gift bag tucked under his chair. Dinner dragged on. Between bites, I caught Melissa glancing toward my mom, probably waiting for her cue. Then, finally, Mom clinked her wine glass. "All right, everyone, we have some news tonight." She beamed at Melissa. "Go ahead, honey." Melissa straightened, her voice soft but carrying just enough drama to pull the whole table in. "So, it's been a rough year, as some of you know," she began, her eyes dropping for effect. "Brian and I, we're getting divorced." The room reacted on cue. Sympathetic murmurs, hands reaching to squeeze hers. She nodded, swallowing hard, clearly loving every ounce of pity. Then she launched into a monologue about new beginnings and focusing on the kids, painting herself as the brave, resilient victim. I waited until she was in the perfect spot, emotionally peaking, tears glistening, the room hanging on her every word, before I shifted in my chair. "That's actually funny," I said, loud enough to cut through the chatter. Heads turned. Melissa's eyes narrowed just slightly. "Because," I continued, pulling the gift bag into my lap, "we have some news too." My husband slid the photo album onto the table and flipped it open. The first picture, our nursery, stared up at everyone. "We're adopting," I said, my voice steady but bright. "The paperwork's done. We're officially matched with a birth mother. We're going to be parents." The reaction was instant. Cheers, gasps, my mom covering her mouth, my aunt wiping her eyes. Even the kids clapped without fully knowing why. The energy in the room shifted like a current, flowing straight past Melissa to me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her smile freeze. She clapped too, but it was that slow, mechanical kind of clapping people do when they're trying not to scream. Her knuckles were white around her wine glass. Someone passed the album down the table and the cooing began. Comments about the crib, the colors, the tiny shoes. My uncle made a toast to new chapters, raising his glass toward me. Melissa took a long drink instead of joining in. For the first time in years, I wasn't the quiet one in the corner. I wasn't the pity case or the punchline. I was the headline. And Melissa? She was watching her spotlight slip right through her manicured fingers. Update. Well, that dinner is apparently still being talked about in my family group chat, and I've gotten about a dozen calls in the last 48 hours. Half of them congratulations, the other half thinly veiled concern. Melissa hasn't called me once. Not a congrats, not a text, nothing. But I have heard from 3 different people that she was caught off guard and felt ambushed. One cousin said she compared my announcement to upstaging a bride at her own wedding, which is hilarious, considering 1, it wasn't her wedding, and 2, she's the same person who turned my infertility into a Thanksgiving punchline. Apparently, after we left, she had a bit of a moment in my mom's kitchen. One of my aunts told me she slammed her glass down so hard on the counter that it cracked, then went on a tear about how everything is always about me now, and how nobody even asked about my divorce after that. Gee, I wonder why. Also, this one really made me laugh. Melissa tried to claim she'd planned her announcement for months, and that I could have picked literally any other time to share our news. I guess she forgot she didn't even tell most people she was getting divorced until last week. A lot of you in the comments after my first post said this was the universe serving karma on a silver platter. I'll admit, it was satisfying watching her squirm in real time. But here's the thing. I think she's gearing up for some kind of retaliation. She's not the type to just sulk and move on. And if she tries, let's just say I have more than one story about her, and some of them are way uglier than a dinner table comment. Melissa didn't waste any time. 3 days after the dinner, my mom called me with that strained, high-pitched tone she only uses when she's pretending to be neutral. "Sweetie," she started, "Melissa feels hurt. She thinks you deliberately tried to overshadow her news." I actually laughed. "Mom, her news was that her marriage imploded. Mine was that I'm becoming a parent. Those aren't even the same category. She just wishes you'd coordinated with her." I cut her off. Coordinated? Like it's a PR campaign? It was obvious Melissa had run crying to my mom, framing herself as the victim yet again. But the more my mom talked, the more I realized Melissa wasn't just sulking. She was rewriting the story. According to her, I'd been waiting to pounce for months, timing my announcement to embarrass her in front of the family. And here's where it got really rich. Later that afternoon, I got a text from my cousin Amy, warning me that Melissa was hinting to people that my adoption wasn't even finalized, and that we might not actually get the baby. The implication was clear. She wanted to plant seeds of doubt, turn my happy news into something fragile and uncertain in people's minds. That's when I decided I wasn't going to just let this blow over. She wanted to play dirty? Fine. I could play cleaner but louder. The next weekend, my husband and I hosted a small brunch for close friends. Nothing huge, maybe 10 people. But one of those friends just happens to be very active on social media. I made sure she got plenty of pictures of us showing off the nursery, talking about our upcoming adoption, even holding up the little onesie we'd bought with the words, "worth the wait" on it. By Monday, those photos were making the rounds online, tagged, shared, and dripping with support. Melissa saw them. I know she did because less than an hour after they went up, she texted me, "Guess you're making sure everyone knows you're the hero now." I stared at my phone for a second, then typed back, "No, just making sure nobody forgets who made the Thanksgiving joke." She didn't respond. But 2 nights later, my husband's car got keyed while parked in our driveway. Deep, angry scratches down the passenger side. The kind you have to really put your weight into. We couldn't prove it was her, but let's just say Melissa has a history of mysterious property damage when she's pissed. That was my line in the sand. I'd given her the chance to just stew and move on. She decided to escalate instead. So I started thinking, maybe it was time the rest of the family heard the full story of that Thanksgiving, word for word. And maybe they'd hear it from someone Melissa couldn't shout over. I didn't want to just blurt it out in the family group chat. That would have been too easy for Melissa to spin. She's a pro at twisting narratives, turning herself into the misunderstood victim. If I was going to finally air the Thanksgiving story, it had to be in a way that left no room for her to interrupt, derail, or shout me down. So I called Claire, my sister-in-law, who also happens to have a massive extended network in the family thanks to her job running community events. She's the kind of person everyone listens to, not because she's loud, but because she's sharp, measured, and doesn't deal in gossip without receipts. I told her exactly what happened that night 6 months ago. The joke about my infertility, the way the table froze, how I'd left the house in the middle of dinner just to breathe without crying in front of everyone. I could hear her tone shift as she realized how calculated it had been. "That's disgusting," she said. "You want me to help make sure people hear it?" "Yes," I said, "but it has to come from someone they won't accuse of making it up." So that weekend, Claire hosted a casual family coffee at her place. No big announcements, just an open-door invite. People came and went. Cousins, aunts, even my mom for a bit. And every time someone mentioned Melissa or brought up the divorce, Claire would lean in and say, "You know what she said to my name at Thanksgiving, right?" Then she'd tell it, exactly as I told her. No embellishments, no dramatics. By the time I arrived, on purpose, 2 hours in, the room was buzzing with it. People weren't even hiding their disgust. One cousin flat out said, "Who does that?" Another muttered, Guess karma's faster than we thought. The best part? Melissa wasn't there, which meant all she got later was the ripple effect. Cold shoulders, shorter conversations, people not rushing to comfort her about the divorce the way they had before. I thought maybe she'd just avoid me for a while, lick her wounds in private. But no, that's not Melissa. 2 nights later, I got a series of late-night DMs from her on Instagram, paragraphs accusing me of destroying her reputation, threatening to make sure everyone knows how manipulative you really are, and the pièce de resistance. You'll regret trying to turn people against me. She must have been drinking because the messages got increasingly unhinged. Random all-caps words, strings of exclamation marks, even a blurry photo of the two of us from years ago with "fake" scrawled over my face in red marker. I didn't respond. I just screenshotted everything, because if she wanted a war, I wasn't going to fight it in the dark. I was going to put her own words under the brightest light possible. Update 2. So, remember how I said Melissa doesn't do quiet? Yeah, she went full meltdown. After my sister-in-law's coffee gathering made the Thanksgiving story public, Melissa apparently decided her best move was to double down. Over the past week, I've had 3 separate relatives forward me screenshots from her Facebook, long, rambling posts about toxic people who pretend to be family, and bitter women who can't handle someone else's success. She didn't name me outright, but yeah, everyone knew. The wild part? In one of those posts, she admitted she'd made a joke that didn't land about my infertility. Tried to frame it as a misunderstanding because some people can't take humor. I guess she thought that little confession would make her look self-aware. Instead, it just confirmed the story was true. And then came the phone calls. My mom's been begging me to just let it go because Melissa's going through so much. My uncle told me I shouldn't kick someone while they're down. But the thing is, Melissa wasn't down when she went after me. She was on top, basking in attention, and she used that moment to take a cheap shot at something she knew would hurt. Here's the part I didn't expect. People are actually pushing back at her now. Claire says she's noticed more relatives skipping her calls, fewer likes on her posts, less sympathy over the divorce. One cousin told me she finally sees Melissa for what she is. It's not just the joke, it's the way she acts when she gets caught. Oh, and those drunk Instagram messages she sent me? Yeah, I saved them. Haven't shared them yet, but I'm keeping them in my back pocket, because if she decides to take this public in a nastier way, I'll have no problem showing exactly what she sent me at 2 a.m., complete with the fake photo and the caps lock threats. The funny thing is, I don't even feel angry anymore, just calm. Like I finally have control of the narrative she's been warping for years. She wanted to humiliate me in front of the family. Now she can't walk into a room without wondering who's quietly thinking, "You went after her for that?" And that, honestly, is better than any big blow-up could ever be. Melissa must have realized her little Facebook rants weren't getting the traction she wanted, because the next stunt she pulled was pure desperation. It was the following Saturday. My husband and I were out running errands when my phone lit up with a string of frantic texts from my mom. "Melissa's here. She's asking where you are. Says she needs to clear the air." I could picture it. Melissa in my mom's living room, pacing, probably talking with that fake, calm voice she uses when she's about to explode. My gut told me not to go, but before I could even respond, my phone started ringing. It was Melissa. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, another call, then another. By the 5th attempt, I finally answered just to stop the noise. "What do you want, Melissa?" I said flatly. "You need to stop telling people lies about me," she snapped. The fake calm was gone. "You're making me look like some kind of monster." "You said it, Melissa," I cut in front of the whole family. "I didn't make you do that." She started yelling over me, her voice getting higher and faster. "You're obsessed with ruining me. You've been waiting for this for years." That's when I heard a loud crash in the background, like something falling over. My mom's voice came through faintly. "Melissa, stop." "You know what?" Melissa hissed into the phone. "If you want a war, fine. Let's have a war." Then she hung up. Not even 10 minutes later, I got a notification. Melissa had tagged me in a Facebook post. My stomach tightened as I opened it. There it was, a photo of me from 2 years ago at a family barbecue, mid-bite into a burger, clearly unflattering, with the caption, "Some people should focus less on other people's marriages and more on their own eating habits." Petty, cruel, and exactly her style. I didn't comment. I didn't message her. Instead, I took screenshots of the post, the voicemails she'd left, and the missed call log. Then I sent them to Claire with a simple message. "If she wants a war, I'm documenting every shot." Claire replied almost instantly, "Good, because people are already disgusted. This will just confirm it." That night, my husband and I sat in bed, scrolling through the comments on Melissa's post. They weren't the chorus of support she was probably expecting. A few people defended her, but more were asking, "Why would you post this?" Or flat out saying, "This is uncalled for." Melissa had overplayed her hand, and I wasn't going to waste the opportunity she'd just handed me. 2 days after the burger photo fiasco, I decided it was time to end this on my terms. Not with more back and forth, not with petty jabs, but with the kind of move Melissa couldn't spin without looking worse. I waited until Sunday morning when I knew half the family would be at church and the other half scrolling their phones over coffee. I posted a single photo to my own Facebook, me and my husband, standing in the finished nursery, holding the framed adoption approval letter. The caption was short and deliberate. 6 months ago, someone made a joke about my infertility in front of our family. Yesterday, we hung this on the nursery wall. Sometimes the best revenge is building the life they said you couldn't have. I didn't tag her. I didn't name her, but I didn't have to. Within an hour, the comments were flooding in. Dozens of congratulations, messages of support, people telling me how much they admired our resilience. A few relatives messaged privately saying they hadn't known the whole story and now understood why I'd been so quiet for so long. Claire told me later that Melissa saw the post almost immediately and stormed out of a brunch she was at, leaving her kids behind with my aunt. She didn't comment, didn't post a rebuttal, just went silent, which, for Melissa, is the loudest admission she's capable of. Over the next week, I noticed the shift. The cousins who used to flock to her Instagram stopped liking her posts. The ones who always took her side started inviting me to things again. Even my mom, who had been trying to play peacemaker, texted me to say she was sorry she didn't realize how bad it had been. I didn't forgive her, not yet, but I appreciated the crack in the wall. As for Melissa, she's still around, still part of the family by blood, but she's not the center anymore. Her spotlight dimmed the moment she realized she couldn't control the narrative. And me? I've got a crib waiting, a plane ticket booked for when our baby's born, and a nursery filled with more love than she'll ever understand. I didn't just take my power back. I took back the room she tried to take from me, and I'm not giving it up again.